Good morning, everyone. It's great to be with all of you as the Coastal and Heartland National Estuary Partnership hosts the 2023 Southwest Florida Climate Summit. I know that your event is in person this year, and I hope you know that I wish I could be there in person too, particularly because I see so many old friends and colleagues on the agenda. It would have been lovely to catch up with all of you. I am grateful that the organizers invited me to spend a few minutes with you this morning as your deliberations continue on topics that are some of the most salient and urgent of our time. As a fifth-generation South Floridian who spent 25 years in the conservation of fragile terrestrial and coastal habitats, I have been, like many of you, on the front lines of the struggle to maintain or restore resilience in natural and built systems as the conditions on the ground change rapidly. Florida's long-standing challenges, such as rapid development, degraded water quality, and invasive species, are all intensified by the meta-challenges brought on by climate change. On top of these synergistic effects, climate change brings its own challenges: storm intensification, deepening drought, record heat. Florida is on the front lines of all of it. In my role as an Assistant Secretary of the Interior, my vantage point has of course changed, and what I see is that many places in our country, from the subtropic and temperate east to the arid west, have become front lines for climate-driven change that makes conversations like those you're having this week both imperative and urgent. Of course, you don't need me to point out the urgency, because climate is sending us stark, sometimes devastating reminders on a regular basis. For 8 consecutive years, the United States has experienced 10 or more billion-dollar natural disasters, events that cause more than $1 billion in damages, including physical damage to infrastructure and sustained economic losses caused by business disruption. 122 separate billion-dollar disasters over the last 7 years have killed 5,000 people and cost the United States more than $1 trillion in damages. 2022 saw 18 billion-dollar disasters, tied for the third highest number on record, which cumulatively cost $165 billion in damages. The Disaster Relief Fund spent over $43 billion on response and recovery in 2022. A 2021 analysis from the Office of Management and Budget found if greenhouse gas emissions continue at pace, the U.S. government could spend between an additional $25 to $128 billion annually on just 6 types of federal expenditures: coastal disaster relief, flood insurance, crop insurance, healthcare insurance, wildland fire suppression, and flooding at federal facilities. I've given these cost statistics because dollars are an intuitively useful way to measure costs, but I don't have to tell the people of Southwest Florida that climate change produces far more profound costs in the loss of human life and livelihoods, the destruction of communities, and the deep sadness that human beings feel when the nature around them is denuded or wiped away. As your federal government, it's our responsibility to respond both reactively and proactively. Let me mention some of the ways that we're doing so. Recent FEMA BRIC awards of over $1 billion for 53 states, territories, and D.C. to improve their infrastructure and make communities more resilient, with an emphasis on increasing resilience to the impacts of climate change and extreme weather events. This year, this funding will more than double to $2.3 billion, boosted by the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law. Through the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, President Biden secured $50 billion in resilience investments, the most in American history, to protect communities against extreme weather. President Biden reestablished the federal flood risk management standard that will reduce flood risk and protect infrastructure investments. We recently launched the CMRA website that, for the first time, provides a live dashboard to help communities see extreme weather and other hazards from climate change, while also providing maps projecting how each community could be impacted in the future. This tool is integrated with the Climate and Economic Justice Screening Tool, which can help users prioritize and direct investments to often overlooked and underserved communities. The administration has also launched major new interagency efforts to accelerate the adoption of modern building codes and to address climate-related financial risk. The President submitted his budget request to Congress last week, and it is a request that seeks to bolster community resilience to climate change. The budget invests more than $24 billion for climate resilience across the Department of the Interior, USDA, the Department of Homeland Security, and the Department of Defense and other agencies to help build community resilience to floods, wildfires, storms, extreme heat, and drought brought on by climate change. Expand conservation and ecosystem management to strengthen America's natural disaster response capabilities, increase the resilience of rural housing to the impacts of climate change while reducing rent burdens, and to ensure the resilience of our nation's defense to climate change. The budget helps state and local communities, tribes, and territories build climate resilience through investing $3.3 billion in various FEMA grant programs, and by investing $500 million for flood hazard mapping, including new data to support future flood conditions, and funding to sustain the Civilian Climate Corps. Now let me return to the subject of nature. Our instinct is to protect nature from the ravages of a changing climate, but we know that nature can also protect us. We know that our coastal natural areas can enhance the resilience of our communities to worsening climate hazards. Coastal wetlands, mangroves, seagrasses, coral and oyster reefs by themselves or in combination with other infrastructure absorb wave energy, reducing coastal erosion and stabilizing shorelines. They can also capture sediment and grow in elevation over time, offering additional protection. These coastal systems are part of the U.S. plans to move forward aggressively to advance nature-based solutions as another powerful tool in our fight against climate change, nature loss, and inequity. In November, the Coastal Resilience Interagency Working Group released a compendium of federal nature-based resources and guidance for coastal communities, states, tribes, and territories to assist coastal communities in evaluating, enabling, and investing in nature-based coastal adaptation strategies. At the Interior Department, we are investing hundreds of millions of dollars in building resilience on public lands, combating invasive species, and investing in large-scale restoration, targeting ecosystems particularly vulnerable to the effects of climate change, like sagebrush grasslands, Appalachian forests, and the great rivers of Alaska, where the mighty Chinook salmon has all but vanished, creating a subsistence and cultural existential crisis for indigenous communities that have relied on salmon since time immemorial. In October of this year, I went home to Florida to see firsthand the damage wrought by Hurricane Ian. A few days later, I flew to Bethel, Alaska, and met with communities trying to recover from Typhoon Murdoch that struck the Bering Strait region of western Alaska just days before Ian struck southwest Florida. Before I was appointed to this job, I knew at a very personal level what climate change means to people and nature on the ground. But today, I know that none of us are in this alone. We must come together, as you are doing this week, with our neighbors and with our fellow Americans across the country to support each other with science, with resources, with compassion and ingenuity, and with a commitment to help each other and our nation be as strong and resilient as possible as we face a more uncertain future than any of us might once have imagined. Thank you for everything you are doing to advance dialogue and find solutions to the climate crisis. Thank you again for inviting me to address you this morning, and I hope your summit is a terrific success.